Wow. See, because we've always thought that like, well, it's going to come in a thief in the night because it's just this big cosmic surprise.
Okay, well, and there's another one is the thief in the night. We throw it around like it just means like you never know when someone might break into your house. It doesn't mean that. So this comes from the ancient Hebrew temple where the chief high priest was known as the thief in the night because he would randomly show up at the temple carrying a torch because they didn't have flashlights, and to make sure that the temple guard was awake and doing their job, or if they were asleep, he would take the torch to the hem of their robe because that would wake them up. And he was referred to as the thief in the night. So when we talk about Christ being the thief in the night, he's coming to see if we are awake, if we're doing our job, if we're keeping our covenants.
This is so much more profound. Why aren't they teaching this?
And it also points to him being the high priest.
Glory, glory, glory.
Since the bride knew the season, but not the day or the hour that the bridegroom would come, she had to keep her oil lamps continuously burning. And so to do that, you would have to keep a pretty good supply of extra oil on the side. When you really break it down and dig into all the parts of this wedding tradition, suddenly the temple makes a whole lot more sense. Our covenants make a whole lot more sense. And it really changes the way we view our relationship with the Savior.
I don't know whether to be amazed or guilty.
But do you see how this Hebrew wedding model really permeates the scriptures and the gospel?
Yeah,
so much of
incredible.
it. Yeah,
dude, Jesus was so much more based and cool. Got our scripture notes up and running. All of the scriptural references used in this episode will be brought to you by scripturenotes.com. For a free trial to Scripture Notes, please visit the link in the description.
My discovery of this began with a study of the parable of the 10 virgins. And what piqued my interest was trying to imagine this, and this is something I really recommend people do when you study your scriptures, is try to visualize what's happening. Pay attention to who's speaking, who's writing, because sometimes that's not the same person, especially in the Book of Mormon. And why? Ask yourself why. So I was doing that with the parable of the 10 virgins, and it occurred to me, this is the weirdest wedding ever. Right?
Yeah. Or a really fun one. I mean, they're turning water into wine, right? Oh, wait, no. That's a different parable. No, yeah, you're right.
But I'm thinking, is this...
They're like locking people out. Yeah,
they're locking people out. It's in the middle of the night. The bride doesn't know when this is going to happen. Yeah. Half of her attendants don't have whatever stuff they're supposed to have for the wedding. They're totally unprepared. This is not how weddings happen.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. That's a good point. I never thought about that. Okay.
And so then I think, why is Jesus teaching this? Like, is he just coming up with a random parable to illustrate a point about being ready for the second coming? And he chose some really weird way to teach that? Yeah. Like, there's got to be something else here. And this is another point of when you study your scriptures, find those weird things. Look for the weird things. Look for the hard things or the confusing things, and then just drill down on those, because that's where you find all the treasures. We think the treasures are in the nice quotable things that you can hang on your wall, but if you find a place in the scriptures where you stumble, take the time to stumble and fall down a little bit and see what you discover. So that's what happened with me here. And as I started to look into, what were the wedding customs at the time of Christ? Come to find out, he's not making this up. This isn't just some random parable. He's actually playing off of the traditional wedding customs that the Jews practiced in his day.
Okay.
And so it's really this Hebrew wedding model. And you think, what does that have to do with me here and now, other than fleshing out this parable a little bit? Well, it turns out that when you really break it down and dig into all the parts of this wedding tradition, suddenly the temple makes a whole lot more sense. Our covenants make a whole lot more sense. And it really changes the way we view our relationship with the Savior.
Dude, this is awesome. Okay, so let's like jump in, man.
Okay.
This is awesome. I'm loving it. Okay.
And I think it's totally arguable that these wedding traditions that are often called Jewish, or you'll hear scholars talk about the Galilean wedding.
Like any euphemism to get out of Israelite so they don't piss off the political community. Yeah,
There you
exactly.
go.
It's like proto-Canaanite, you know. They
Right.
never,
Yeah, because I mean that's what it is, right? So the religion of Moses is not the modern Jewish religion that we see today. They're different. And Moses was tapping into something that was more ancient than his own. He's tapping into the religion of going back to Israel, Jacob, and Abraham. And all of that goes back to Adam. So this comes from the beginning. And you actually, when you understand this motif, you understand so much more about Genesis and what was happening there between Adam and Eve.
Okay.
So let's talk a minute about what these traditions were, and then we can unpack that and see how it applies to those.
Okay, rock on.
Okay. So the model of the Jewish wedding, or I'll call it the Hebrew wedding model, begins, it has 3 stages. And if you've talked to Dave Butler and his 3-part temple space, it really maps onto that as well.
Okay.
So
let's hope so, or else I'm gonna have like competing podcasts.
or else Dave's gonna come after me and be like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah, there's already enough factions in the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints. I don't like. There's like the Richard Bushman faction versus like the new Sear Stone in the Hat faction, or the anti-Sear Stone. That there's like Mesoamerica versus Heartland. I don't need like like Andrea Woodmansey versus Dave Butler. You know what?
Dave would win. He would totally win.
Yeah. Okay. Keep going.
No. So it's a 3-part wedding ceremony.
Okay, cool.
And it takes place over a year-ish. So if you imagine your wedding ceremony taking a year.
Wait, it took a year to get married?
Yeah.
Wait.
How would that be?
Okay, I'm sorry. I don't want to be vulgar, but like half the time these bishops are like, you're going to get into trouble if you take longer than 6 months. You want to have a short engagement. You know what I'm saying? Like, what the heck? Like a year?
It did.
Like,
I mean, personal note, my husband's a convert, and so we had to wait a year.
Yeah. Well, good. Woodmansey, you go, brother. You know what I'm saying? You had the most biblical wedding out there. All right, dude.
Yeah, it was more biblical than we realized, I guess. But the part that wasn't biblical was that, these were arranged marriages. And that's something we don't like in our culture. It's not a custom that we embrace. But it's because the father of the groom would meet with the father of the bride. And this was considered a binding of 2 families. It wasn't just 2 people that fell in love and the rest is history. It's a binding of 2 families. And if you think about the purpose of our covenants, it's not just, especially the sealing ceremony, it's not just 2 people getting married, or it's not just us making in the church we talk about a covenant's a 2-way promise, like between you and God. It's bigger than that, because this binds us into the family of Abraham, into that Abrahamic covenant. It binds us into our families, it binds us to Christ, and it binds us into that whole family.
Were most weddings back then arranged by the 2 father figures?
Yeah, they were. And it wasn't without input from the bride and groom.
Yeah, because I was about going to say, if I was arranging my son's wedding, like, screw you, bro. I'm making a better choice than you.
Well, I think that's part of the wisdom of it. Is that,
okay.
The fathers bring a little more to the table and have more understanding of what may work. But it is creating this familial relationship.
Okay.
And I think we should see our relationship with Christ in those same terms, that it's not contractual. Saying it's a 2-way promise makes it sound a little bit contractual. Like, I have a 2-way promise with my landlord. We signed this agreement. It's much more of a familial relationship. And so it involves sacrificial love and enduring commitment. And so it's so much more than a contract. So that's part of the reason why the fathers would make this selection and make these arrangements. And certainly this model still exists in various cultures today around the world, where you have arranged marriages, and then, it goes off the rails sometimes. But part of this was to protect the bride and to make sure she would be well taken care of.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So having it arranged, I think we see this turn up in the scriptures when Christ says he prays for those whom thou hast given me. So that's this idea that the Father has given a bride to his Son. So talking about it in those terms, it's just this Hebrew mindset of how we view covenant relationships.
Man, how come we're not teaching this in gospel doctrine? Are you just one of those gospel doctrine overachievers that actually does like the archaeological insights? Because like that really does change it. Even just the premise of this idea that, okay, we were talking about widespread arranged weddings here. Like where father figures were concerned with the legacy of entire grandchildren and future generations.
Right.
We weren't just talking about the Montagues and the Capulets, little black sheep that found each other in the forest and decided, oh, we're going to run off and love each other. You know, we're talking about the merging of empires here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. It really is the establishment of kingdoms, eternal kingdoms.
Wow. Okay. Keep going. This is great. Keep going. I'm loving this.
So yeah, it was, so that's the first phase of this wedding would be called the eros, and it's a betrothal process. So the fathers meet together, they agree, and sorry, scratch that. It wasn't the eros, it was the shidduchin.
Okay,
that's the matchmaking portion where they're figuring out who should. They're arranging things, you know, who are we going to choose for a bride?
I would die to be a fly on the wall. Like, could you imagine like two fathers? It's like, all right, Steve, I got like 5 sons, 6 daughters. One of the sons, I'll be honest, he's kind of a dud, but one of your daughters, she ain't too bright either. So why don't let's stick those 2 together. And then look, my best looking one should go with your best looking one. Cause you don't want ugly grandkids, do you? No. All right. So in the middle 3,
I mean, you never know who might turn out to be an 8-cow wife, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's like, geez, man, like so brutal. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so, and you actually see, I think this all stems from this idea with Adam and Eve, where who chose the bride for Adam?
Oh, yeah, you're right. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then even phrases like many are called, but few are chosen.
Oof. I never put that into a romantic context before. Man, that's even more savage than Tinder, where like 85% of women like swipe away. That is brutal. Okay, keep going.
But I mean, we can get to that later. Okay, so this is the first part, is just the matchmaking. And it's a combining of families. It's, and at this point, once they've agreed on things, it's considered a legally binding marriage, even though they haven't done anything yet. They're not even living together at this point. But when this agreement is made and a spouse is chosen, that's it.
Yeah. So why wait a year though?
Well, because there's some things that have to happen. You
Did
have to
so
be
many
prepared.
wives run away? Like, were there just so many like husbands that are like, I ain't marrying her. She's crazy, Dad. Like, they just.
Well, have you ever seen Fiddler on the Roof?
Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen the obligatory. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but they have the matchmaker, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it wasn't just the fathers; it was a hired professional that handled these things. But
wow. Okay. Okay.
Okay. So they choose a bride. And then they have to make this betrothal formal. And you see this with Joseph and Mary in the Bible, where Mary ends up pregnant and Joseph knows it's not him because they're only engaged. They haven't done anything, which in our world, I know that's a little different, but, and that's because once they were engaged, once they were betrothed, they wouldn't see each other for a year.
What's the advantage of that culturally, like, why would that custom evolve out of a culture to not see each other for a year? What's the advantage?
Because there's some preparation that has to happen before you can establish a household. The groom has to go away and he has to prepare a place for his bride. he goes back to his father's estate or wherever, and he builds a home for him and his bride to live in.
Wow.
So that should start making you think of when Christ said, I go to prepare, in my Father's house are many mansions. I go to prepare a place for you. He is the bridegroom leaving for that year, metaphorical year, to go prepare a place for his bride, his covenant bride.
Rachel Patterson, in one of our recent interviews, talking about the temple as a birth allegory, she brought up a really good point. She said, why do we still use so many sports analogies in our church when the scriptures are rife with an analogy all of us already understand, which is like birth, okay? So much of our attachment to that cultural celebration of marriage has been lost that now it actually makes sense. Wow, so this is why the Lord was leaving, because he was literally preparing a place as a bridegroom for the bride.
Right.
And this also kind of informs in Revelation where it says like the woman ran into the wilderness and the woman was like representative of the church and she was like gone for a while or something.
I haven't made that connection, but that's interesting. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Keep going. This is great.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm digging.
So, and the Hebrew word for this phase of the marriage ceremony is the erosin, and it comes from the Hebrew asar, which means to bind. So, and it means you're binding permanently. This isn't just like, oh, okay, we'll stick these two things together. This is covenant binding. And so you see that with Joseph and Mary, that he couldn't have been the father, but he felt that sense of duty to her. So he was probably away preparing a house for her to live in. And so you imagine what he would have been going through. He's expecting to have this pure bride waiting for him while he's off preparing a place to live, and he hears that she's with child. That had to be devastating for him, and for him to then, and in that situation, under Jewish law, he had the right to have her stoned to death.
Dude, that is hardcore, man.
It was hardcore. But you think of what kind of man he was, that he chose not to do that. He was going to put her away privately.
Well, because that's kind of also what I'm wondering is like in your studies of all these ancient marriage ceremonies, and we could talk about the archaeology of this for days, but I only want to talk about things that necessarily inform this metaphor, right? But I do have to know, like, how in love actually were these couples, I guess, oftentimes?
I think they often were. And I think a lot of times the arranged marriage was recognizing an attraction that already existed.
So that's the feeling that you kind of get, that like every once in a while there was parents that bailed out idiot sons and idiot daughters from ruining their own lives by arranging a marriage, but other times it was basically just kind of like the merging of two obvious truths into one. Right. Yeah. Under like the protection of the society. Right. Okay.
So the families, once they had made the selection, they'd come together and formalize this betrothal, first by signing what's called the Katuba. And this is the written marriage agreement. And if you look, you can search on Google and find examples of Katuba. Jewish weddings still incorporate these. You can have beautiful Katuba designed and hang it on your wall. And it will spell out the terms of the marriage agreement. And it's almost all about what the groom will do for the bride, what he promises to provide for her, what he will do for her. I think Ben Shapiro famously said he would offer $10 million to his wife or something like that.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. Yeah, it's in his, because he talked about it. It's in like his Jewish prenup or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow, okay, rock on. And by the way, is it about this big with like almost like a coat of arms painted on top?
Yes.
And then it's all written in Hebrew? Okay, those are all over my friends' houses here in LA. Okay, I've seen those things.
That's what they are.
It's like Mormons have the proclamation of the family and then like Jews have the ketubah. Okay, rock on.
And anciently, we don't have this problem so much in our day, but anciently it included a promise that if the bride was kidnapped and put into slavery, that the groom would come redeem her and buy her out of slavery. So when you apply that to what Jesus Christ did for us on a spiritual level, he's literally promised to redeem us. We call him the Redeemer for a reason.
Okay, like, so that's very heartwarming to know that it's in your prenup that I will redeem you from slavery. But also, what kind of system were we working with here? If like, hey, so by the way, do you have the redemption from slavery clause? Because there's like all kinds of people just stealing our wives here.
Right. But I mean, slavery was, I mean, that's a different topic for another day. But even just falling into debt, you could be taken into slavery for a certain time and you would have to be redeemed. Leviticus talks about a redeemer having to come or if a slave has his wife and his kids and they're all in slavery, but he decides to stay and continue to be owned by the master and serve his master because he loves his master, then he'll have an all put through his ear. So he would be the redeemer for his family, but he'd also be pierced. So this all prefigures what Christ did for us.
Wow. Okay. All right. Keep going. Keep going.
Okay. So, and actually this is a side note, but I thought this was super interesting. The Katuba anciently was usually written under what's sometimes called a Jerusalem window, and it would be an arch shape, and the terms of the contract would be written under the arch, and put on a blue background. So if you think about it, have you seen any new logos lately where there's like an arch on a blue background?
I see what you're doing.
With the covenant inside, or the person who is the covenant.
Did they do that on purpose, or did you just figure that out later?
When President Nelson popped that up on the screen during General Conference, my jaw hit the floor. I just thought that's a Katuba right there. And I don't know that there was any intention behind that, but it's sure what it looks like to me.
So why doesn't the church office building have you writing the gospel doctrine class? Because if I have to hear another stupid milk strippings story, like that's like a thing on our show, is just like in pro baseball. You ever heard of the Mendoza line? Do you know what that is?
No, I don't. Sorry.
I'm using one of the stupid sports analogies that we're not supposed to use, but I'm going to use it anyway. Some statistician at some point figured out that here's the basic line that you have to be. This is the perfect middle ground player in terms of RBIs, home runs, how fast he runs the 40, whatever. That any player who is above this line statistically is worth hiring. Any player below this line is worth firing, right? That milk stripping story, like that we need a new Mendoza line, we need a new, like we should be saying these details. Like, did you know marriages were arranged? It was the binding of two empires, that the women would have to be redeemed in a Katuba. By the way, this still persists in modern iconography. Look at the new church logo. Like this is profound stuff. Yet here we are talking about, I don't know, LDS feelings barn, So, all right, keep going.
Okay. So yeah, they would do the Katuba, the couple and the parents would sign it, and then they would sign it in triplicate. And so that the couple could have one, the father of the bride would keep a copy. So he could always go to his son-in-law and say, hey, look, remember you promised this. And then
taking care of my daughter, dude.
And then they would file one with the local magistrate.
Really?
So yeah.
Okay. I kind of like this model. I got to be honest with you. Like this
it's
is
like
cool. Yeah, this is actually kind of BA. It's like, you're going to take care of my daughter. You're going to do it the way that we all agreed, man.
Right.
Or else, see, now we have to like threaten them with like guns and stuff. But like, back then there's like, we got this Katuba.
There might have been some threatening with stones back then. But
brutal. Okay, keep going.
And they would also, in this Katuba, they would lay out what the mohar was. So the mohar was the dowry that the groom's family would pay to the bride's family. We look at that and think, oh, you're buying a bride. How horrible. It was actually intended to be, to provide financial stability to the bride if something should happen to the groom, or if he quits.
Brutal.
But it would be, this mohar was meant to provide that financial backing for her life. It wasn't necessarily purchasing a bride like we would think of it. It wasn't that. It was providing for her. And this is actually where we get the word dowry from. Providing a dowry.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Does that sound like endowment? That's where the word endowment comes from.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So an endowment is literally a gift that keeps on giving. because when you have an endowment, you're making an investment and you're living off the interest. And so when we go to receive our endowment, we're receiving a gift from a bridegroom that is meant for our eternal well-being, and it keeps on giving. It's a constant source of power.
So do you feel like the great allegory of the temple is, some have suggested a birth allegory. Are you saying it's more like a Hebrew temple arrangement allegory? What are you thinking?
I think it's all the above. I think the temple is so layered and so rich that we haven't even begun to tap into it.
Wow. Okay, keep going. I want to hear more.
Okay, so the bride would receive this dowry. Actually, and usually the father of the bride would keep this, kind of like a trust fund. And the groom would then give a personal gift to the bride. It was called the matan, and it was a token of his love for her, and that he would remain.
Good to know he came up with something in this process.
Yeah, he did.
Because so far, Daddy 1 and Daddy 2 are the ones doing all the work.
Right. But this is where we get the idea of a wedding ring.
Okay, cool.
Your wedding ring is a token of that covenant marriage bond that you have with your spouse. It's also the reason why the woman with the lost coin in that parable.
Parable, yeah.
It wasn't just a piece of money she lost. It was a coin from her headdress. And that's when a woman was married and her husband gave her these tokens or these coins, she would sew them onto her headdress as a sign that she was a married woman. And so losing that, it's kind of like losing your wedding ring. That's why she was looking so hard to find it.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Okay.
And so that parable has, we talk about it in terms of, going to find the lost sheep, find the lost one. In a lot of respects, it's talking about finding our lost covenants, because those are signs of our covenants. And so maintaining our
I never
covenants.
thought about that. Okay.
Yeah.
Jeez. I don't know whether to be amazed or guilty.
But do you see how this Hebrew wedding model really permeates the scriptures and the gospel?
Yeah,
so
this
much
is
of
incredible.
it. Yeah. So that's when the bridegroom would leave, and Christ says in John 14, in my Father's house are many mansions. I go to prepare a place. And then that's when they would start the wedding preparations in earnest. And so the groom's building a house. The bride is spending her time preparing for the wedding, making a dress, arranging for her attendants, hopefully storing some oil, and learning how to run a household.
Wait, why would she be storing oil again? Is that just like a proverbial dig or what?
Yeah, no, that's a proverbial dig.
Oh, okay, good. Whew. I was about to say, is there something here I missed? All right, okay, cool.
No, but she probably should, because these weddings actually did take place at night.
Yeah, what is the reason? Was it just to fight the cool of the heat of the day?
I'm sure
what?
that was part of it. I think there's some suspense built into it as well. Like, you don't know when it's going to happen. He could show up at any time.
Okay. All right. Okay. Yeah.
So let's see. And you see this in the Old Testament too. Like, if you go to the book of Hosea, it all starts with Hosea the prophet and his adulterous wife. And then he forgives her and marries her. And you're thinking, this is like the weirdest object lesson ever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, totally.
But I think what it's demonstrating is that Christ is the bridegroom. He is married to an adulterous wife who is all of us, because we've all broken the covenant in some way, somehow.
Yeah.
And yet he's still able to purify us and bring us back into that covenant. So you see the echoes even back in the Old Testament, especially in the Old Testament, I should say. Okay, so another thought that hit me with this idea during this betrothal period, where, we see it with Joseph and Mary, and Joseph could have had Mary stoned. He had every right to do that. We as the church or covenant makers who have also broken covenants, whether seriously or in minor ways, we deserve a spiritual stoning.
Yeah.
That's what we deserve according to the law.
Yeah.
And this plays out with Christ when he's with the woman taken in adultery, and she's there on the ground. They're ready to start throwing stones, and he steps in between them. And I think we miss this sometimes, where we think it's just a story of how forgiving Jesus is. But it's more than just forgiving, because he's literally between the stones and the woman. He's ready to take those stones for her. So through his atonement, he took those spiritual stones for us that we deserved. We deserved all that cosmic punishment for our sins. But he stepped in between. And then he even says, "Woman, where are thine accusers?" Right? It's not just, the word in Hebrew for accuser is Satan. And so he's basically saying, okay, you covenant breaking woman, where is Satan now? I've taken your punishment for you. And that's what he does for us, is we're the covenant breaking woman.
Yeah.
And Satan, the great accuser, is gone because Christ took that for us.
Wow. This is profound, man. This is amazing. Okay.
Yeah, it's another dimension to that story. So another element during this betrothal period was that, they're separated for a year or so, and there would be a designated friend of the groom that would transmit messages between the two.
A wingman.
A wingman.
Yes. All right. Awesome.
And so you could correlate to this to perhaps the prophet.
Okay.
Who's transmitting messages from Jesus Christ, the bridegroom, to us as the church, potentially the Holy Ghost. There's some different interpretations. I'll leave that up to you.
Okay.
And the guests would be given the first of 2 invitations to the wedding. They'd be told this is going to happen in about a year, so be ready. They would then switch their robes, the way they tied their robes, to the other shoulder to indicate that they had accepted a wedding invitation.
Really?
Yes.
Wait, we didn't get taught that a decade ago? What? We're missing out on major symbolism here.
We are.
That's pathetic.
And this is part of the reason why I think this is so important, because we assume that so many things we do in the church are just the way it is. Maybe we don't understand it. We go along with it.
Or the Freemasonic
and then as
leftovers.
soon as somebody throws out, oh, well, he's just copying Masonic stuff, then people lose their testimonies because we don't understand what it actually is.
Wow. Okay. Keep going, dude.
Okay. So then,
you know what I feel like? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but have you ever been to the haunted house where you walk through the dark section and then all of a sudden there's all the dots on the walls, and then there's people in bodysuits that are wearing the dots, and then when all of a sudden they move, you realize
you see them.
Yeah. Then you see them and you realize, like, I walked past one and like it was actually behind me and it could have like stabbed me in the back or slit my throat with a razor or something crazy like that. It's like, and you realize how vulnerable you were the whole time. Like, I feel like right now, like I've been missing out for years on like symbolism. That
I'm glad you went to the haunted house. The scene I go to is a Disney princess with Rapunzel, and she's up in the tower and she's been painting because she has nothing better to do. And she's painting all these stars in the sky and the lanterns, and it finally dawns on her that she's the princess, and it was there in front of her all the time. She's this lost princess.
Oh, and okay. I didn't remember that part of the story. I just remember.
I've probably watched a lot more Disney movies than you have.
Yeah, okay, cool.
So it happens when you have 5 kids.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, keep going.
So, but to that point, I think when we understand what underlies the temple ceremony and what the true meaning is of it, we start to recognize who we really are.
Wow, this is profound. I am digging. Okay,
so phase 3 of this wedding. It's now been about a year, and they go into what's called the Nisuin, which in Hebrew means to lift up. And so if you can go through the scriptures and look for all the instances of being lifted up, it's all over the place.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That when Christ returns, the bridegroom returns, he will lift you up.
Let me guess, it's like a barn raising, like the Amish barn raising, right?
No, so what they'd actually do is lift the bride up onto what was called an Empyrean. And it, you see it with the staves that go through the sides, and the guys carry it on their shoulders, and the bride's up there. They've literally lifted her up, and they carry her to the wedding on this thing. But you see Christ talk all the time about being lifted up. And that's in this frame of reference from this Hebrew wedding model.
Wow.
So when you're being lifted up, you're not just being like randomly floating up into the air.
Yeah, what's it symbolic of?
You're going to the wedding ceremony with the bridegroom, who is Jesus Christ.
Okay.
So yeah, okay. So we're about a year into this engagement. It's time for the actual wedding to happen.
Okay.
What determines the time is the father of the groom. He decides when the wedding will be. Nobody else knows. And like Jesus said, no man knoweth the day nor the hour.
So that's
only
where that
my
comes
Father
from.
in heaven.
That man, how is this not like New
Why
Testament?
don't we know this? I know.
What I feel like I've been robbed. I've gotten a million stupid ensign stories that are like at best cringy non sequitur, but like I didn't know our church logo was not a hypochondriac, a Hyperion. What's it called?
A Katuba.
A Katuba. Why did I think it was a hypo?
And I don't know that it was intended to be that, but it sure looks like one.
Okay, like how have we missed out on all this? Jeez. Okay, keep going. Keep going.
Okay, so where was I before you rudely interrupted me?
Oh yeah. Savage. We were talking about she gets raised up.
Oh,
and
yes.
lifted
Oh, the
up,
father of the groom decides when it's going to happen.
and then the father
Because
of the groom.
This is no man knoweth the day nor the hour, my Father only. Because it was only the father of the groom who could decide when the wedding was going to happen.
Jeez. Okay, now why was that?
Because when you are bringing somebody's daughter into your family, and she's going to live on your property, and you live in this kind of honor society. Honor means a lot to them. Not in our society anymore. We have no shame, right? But
Yeah.
You're not going to bring this new daughter-in-law into some hut that your stupid son threw together in an hour, right?
Yeah.
You're going to make sure he has done his finest work and that all the preparations are ready, because you can't have wedding guests showing up to this, ramshackle thing. The father of the groom would make sure that this home was ready and that his son had done a good job, that all the preparations were done.
Why aren't we going back to this? Like seriously, like why aren't father-in-laws just being like, okay, bro, if you're an idiot, you're going to join my trade union, and then I'm going to supervise you until you become like, how
Right.
is this not?
Be a man, be a provider.
Yes.
And the honor of our family rides on this. So do a good job. Be prepared to
Exactly.
be that father and that husband.
I am going to be doing this with my daughter's boyfriends. Like, you have no idea. Like, they will be getting their pest control licenses if they cannot provide. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, wow, keep going.
Yeah. So that's why the father of the groom got to decide when the wedding would happen. And once he felt like the preparations were done, his son was ready, he would say, okay, go get your bride.
So so all of this symbology of us not knowing like when the second coming is happening is because father-in-law needs to check off the work of the preparation.
Yeah.
Not because it's some unknown thing,
Right.
but because God is literally supervising
The preparations.
the preparation, and
Yes.
until he's content that it's sufficiently prepared, ain't nobody moving in.
Exactly.
Wow. See, because
Yeah.
we've always thought that like, well, it's going to come in a thief of the night because it's just this big cosmic surprise.
Okay, well,
and
there's another one, is the thief in the night. We throw it around like it just means like you never know when someone might break into your house. It doesn't mean that. So this comes from the ancient Hebrew temple, where the chief high priest was known as the thief in the night, because he would randomly show up at the temple carrying a torch, because they didn't have flashlights, and to make sure that the temple guard was awake and doing their job, or if they were asleep, he would take the torch to the hem of their robe, because that would wake them up. And he was referred to as the thief in the night. So when we talk about Christ being the thief in the night, he's coming to see if we are awake, if we're doing our job, if we're keeping our covenants.
This is so much more profound. Why aren't they teaching this?
And it also points to him being the high priest. And I know Dave Butler's talked a lot about Margaret Barker. She has a whole book about the great high priest. It's awesome. I recommend it if you can get through it. It's pretty heady stuff. But
what are you saying?
Jesus Christ.
No, I'm just kidding.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, maybe not for you, Cardin.
Oh, brutal.
Sorry. Okay. But basically, it points to Christ being the high priest on our behalf. And so the thief in the night isn't just like, or no man knoweth the day nor the hour. These aren't just random phrases to say, well, you can't even know, so don't even try. It points to Christ being our high priest, to being our sacrifice on our behalf.
So I've got Andrea Woodmansey in my studio right now telling me in 30 minutes more than I learned in Sunday school how like the second coming won't happen until the Father has actually signed off on the preparations, and that it comes like a thief in the night because the high priest would come in and straight up set your robes on fire if he thought that the guards of the temple were falling asleep. Like, this is so much more profound. But now, no, what do we get now? General conference talks where it's like, brothers and sisters, the gospel is like a really nice casserole. You know, some people are eggs and some people are bacon. And like, no, Jesus will set your robes on fire if you've fallen asleep on your covenant.
Well, I mean, and when you study, this is going off into the second coming stuff, but when you study the second coming, he talks all the time about how there's going to be a burning, right? It's because when that high priest comes, that thief in the night comes, there's a burning, like literally setting their robes on fire. So,
well, and then also, I just realized this is a cartoon waiting to happen, because if your robes got set on fire, now you have to run out naked. That's hilarious.
Yeah, but I mean, think about this in temple terms. I mean, you're laughing about it, making a joke. Think about it though. If you lose your temple robes,
yeah,
like what were Adam and Eve before? There was a sacrifice that covered them.
Oh, that's true. Wow. Jeez, man. I can't even make a joke without stumbling on something profound in here, you know?
Look at you.
Wow. Okay.
And just to defend General Conference talks, I think they're awesome. And the cinnamon rolls I make to go with them are really good too.
Dude, do you know how much heat I got you may not realize this, but like recently we recorded a video on this part member family where he was raised completely anti-Mormon, like passing out anti-Mormon flyers in Arizona.
There's a childhood for you.
Yeah, down there with you. Yeah, big.
Down at the Easter pageant, probably.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, one of those guys like ended up converting to the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. Now he's totally active.
That's amazing.
It was Chris and Claire Thomas. It came out a couple of weeks ago recently, but I got so much heat because I said, well, what was the tipping point? It's like, you know what? Conference talks. And I was like, that's like the most boring part of our church, bro, you know? And that one offhand comment, I have never been lit up so hard in the comments than when I dare say that conference talks might be a little bit boring. You know what I'm saying? I got like burnt to a crisp, man. Okay, so you defend conference. Meanwhile, I'm here. We need to freaking teach people the robes are going to be on fire and Jesus is going to do it if they fall asleep on their covenants. Wow. All right.
Yeah, but I think it shows how seriously the Lord takes the covenants we make with him. We don't take them that seriously. When he's in, he's all in, to the point that he sacrificed his life.
Wow, man, this is, like I said, I don't know whether to be amazed at how much I missed or just feel guilty. You know, wow. Okay, keep going.
Okay, so the father of the groom comes in and says it's time for the wedding. The groom would usually wear a golden crown, and Christ is depicted through the scriptures many times as wearing a golden crown. We still, you know, you go back to some of that good Catholic art or the Eastern Orthodox art, he's always got a halo on. So,
yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right.
And then the groom would often... you know, they didn't have cologne like we do. Nothing good like that. So they'd use frankincense and myrrh, which were the scents for a groom. So when the wise men show up with gold, frankincense, and myrrh, they're recognizing him as the great bridegroom.
Wow. Okay. Geez, it's almost like his whole entire life was getting prepared for this kind of sacrifice that was associated basically upon the steps of a marriage ritual, it sounds
Right.
like.
Well, and I think what actually happened is it's a little bit cyclical, but the marriage ceremony, I think, grew out of an understanding of who Christ was and what his covenant looks like, what his covenant relationship to us looks like.
Okay.
So, and then those wedding traditions develop, and then the scriptures use those to teach about who Christ is.
Wow. Okay.
So they're a little bit self-reinforcing. So when the groom's ready now, he's smelling good with his frankincense and myrrh. He's got his gold crown on. He's got his robes on, and the wedding procession begins. And it comes in the middle of the night, and so many scriptures talk about Christ's second coming being in like the darkest day, like the night.
Yeah, exactly.
Earth's history.
Like almost like they're trying to have less people show up. They're doing it like so clandestinely, you know?
Well, you gotta stay awake, right?
Yeah, for
Gotta
real.
keep those torches lit and stay awake, and make sure nobody's breaking in. So,
yeah. Wow. Okay.
okay, so they start this really joyful procession, and I think it would be actually a really fun wedding because the bride was supposed to be awake and watching and waiting. She knew the season. Christ tells us we'll know the season. If you watch for the signs, you'll know about when it's going to happen. The bride was doing that because she knew, it's going to be roughly a year. So she knew it wouldn't be next week, but she, when the right season came, she would start really watching and paying attention to the signs and watching across, the town for that processional in the middle of the night to see those lights moving through town in the middle of the night. And it would be the groom and all of his family and friends carrying those torches. And there would be two running ahead. And you think of the two witnesses who come in advance of Christ. But they'd be blowing the shofar, which is, the horn.
So the woman who was getting married didn't even know.
No, the bride did not know.
So okay. So women all the time in January start seeing all of the gyms around saying, "Get your summer bod ready." You know what I'm saying? Because we know in like 90 days we're going to be going to the beach or something.
Yeah, well,
and so
that's
like,
here in California.
Yeah, that's true. 90-day calisthenics or whatever, right? So she had like a year to prep for this wedding.
Yeah.
But then like you knew that pretty much any given night when you went to sleep in that 11th month onward, basically, that you might just get woken up. Like if he was really super prepared and an overachiever and your dad liked him, maybe on the first night of the 12th month, boom.
Yeah.
Those trumpets are
Could be.
do.
Yeah. And so
But maybe it would go until the very last day because dad wasn't impressed.
it could.
And they're doing, oh man, you would be a wreck
the
every one of those
suspense would be
nights.
killing you.
You would be a wreck. Is there any evidence that they would kind of cheat with that and just say like, look, I think it might happen next Sunday?
I'm sure that happened, but
Okay. All right. Okay. Keep going.
but let's stick with the model here. So
Yeah. Okay.
most of these weddings also happened in the fall, and that's some practical reasons. There is it's after the harvest, so they have time to do this kind of thing because this wedding feast was going to last a week, which is why you run out of wine.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So the bride knew the season. She knew it was going to be in the fall. And in fact, there are 7 main Jewish feasts. They're outlined in Leviticus 23, if you want to go read up on that. One of them is Rosh Hashanah, or it's Yom Teruah, the Day of Trumpets. And you think of this procession of the bridegroom coming, and they're all blowing these trumpets. That's incorporated into this idea of Rosh Hashanah, where you have the blowing of the trumpets.
Wow.
And as a side note, Moroni came to Joseph Smith on Rosh Hashanah, and he's depicted as an angel, a messenger or a friend of the bridegroom blowing the trumpet.
Yeah. Sometimes we just completely forget that like to God, it wasn't just an 1800s, 19th century agricultural New York faith he was starting. It was the continuation of all of the ancient Israelite symbology. And that's why the earliest Mormonites viewed themselves as a Zionist movement, gathering the 12 tribes of Israel, and not just like starting the cool, great North American religion, right?
Right. And I think we forget that. We lose sight of that sometimes. And we think that, oh, this is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Like it's just another knockoff Christian faith.
Yeah.
Like it's, you could go to that building down the street or go down a few doors to that one.
Yeah, we're like real life church, just without the crazy band and some better scriptures. Like, what?
I mean, we don't get any good PowerPoint presentations and the band's not that great, but.
Exactly, dude. It's like, oh man, goodness gracious.
But what it is actually the restoration of this covenant that binds all eternity together. And so it is this cosmic covenant that I think holds creation together. You get a sense of this when you study the book of Abraham. And it's, it dates back to the time of Adam. And so, yeah, from God's perspective, this is all one thing. This isn't the establishment of some new organization that Joseph Smith thought, hey, this will be a better flavor of Christianity. This is actually the reestablishment of this covenant that God has with his children to bring us into his family and onto his property, so to speak, so that we can eternally be part of that family of God.
Wow. Okay. This is amazing. All right. Keep going.
Okay. So, since the bride knew the season, but not the day or the hour that the bridegroom would come, she had to keep her oil lamps continuously burning. And so to do that, you would have to keep a pretty good supply of extra oil on the side. And so that's
okay. Repeat that. Just those last two sentences. Repeat that again.
Okay. I don't know what I said. Because the bride didn't know exactly the day or the hour, but she knew the season, she could then have in supply extra oil to keep her oil lamps burning continuously during that season.
Because she knew the second that she hears those trumpets.
She hears the trumpets and she sees the lights coming. She's
out of the flip-flops and into her decent heels, and then she better make sure her hair done be did.
Right.
Because they're only 10 blocks away,
right? Exactly.
Wow. So that's where the parable of the 10 virgins and the necessity of the oil comes from.
Right. And what does the oil symbolize? There's a lot of debate about this, and I think there's valid points to all of the interpretations. But in Matthew 5, when Christ is giving the Sermon on the Mount, which Dave Butler and others, Jack Welch, have done a great job of showing how the Sermon on the Mount was an ordinance, that it was a temple ordinance. In there, he tells us to be the salt and the light. And these verses are right together. I think it's like verse 13, 14. If the salt of the earth loses its savor, wherewith it will it be salted? And then he says, ye are the light of the world. That seems a little bit disjointed to us until you consider the fact that they would sprinkle salt in the oil to make it burn brighter.
Get out of town. Really?
Really.
Whoa.
So the salt and the oil and the light are all part of that covenant. In keeping that covenant, you have the bride would have to have those things in order to be ready for the wedding. And so if you're lacking the salt and the oil and you don't have the light, you can't participate in the wedding.
Man. Okay, just I thought I could not absorb more, but I just did. So okay, keep going. So yeah, the groom and all of his buddies would show up at the bride's place. She would come out. They would put her on the Aperion. They would lift her up. The bride is lifted up. When Christ talks about being lifted up, he's talking about the bride, the covenant keepers that have the salt and the light. And then they head off to the wedding ceremony. They go back to the groom's place. They go into the estate that's got a wall around it and a door. And as soon as they're in, it's nighttime, right? So you're not going to leave the door hanging open. They shut the door and they bolt it. Because back in those days, you didn't have, nice deadbolts and stuff. You had a beam that you put across to bolt the door shut. So when it's shut, it's shut. Jeez, yeah. And by the way, Jews now I don't know if this was just the sect that I was worshiping with, but I went to the Central Synagogue in New York, which is not the most Orthodox. They're not like, they're not like Hasidic Jews.
Right.
And from what I understand, they're fairly conservative Jews, but not like the most conservative. But let me tell you, they would bolt that door shut when that third star in heaven showed up. Like, Jews show up early for services. And if you've ever driven through Brooklyn Heights on a Friday evening, Google Maps took me through Brooklyn Heights Friday afternoon, like to drop off one of my writers for this comedy I was writing. And it is Hasidic Jews running to get to the church on time. And you're like, whoa, there's like, this ain't just jaywalking. This is Jay running.
Right.
And like, I almost hit like 3 different Jewish people bolting across the street in front of my car to get to the synagogue because they lock it. Like, there's no showing up late and taking the sacrament in the foyer. No. You're locked out and you endure the shame of not having like celebrated the Sabbath. It is hardcore.
It is. And I actually kind of had this experience when they were, I think it was the Gila Valley temple dedication. So Gila Valley, southeastern Arizona. And they made all of the stake centers in my area in Arizona extensions of the temple for purposes of the dedication. And we had this special recommend to attend the temple dedication. And we were told, arrive 30 minutes early because when it starts, we're locking the doors. They will be locked and you cannot come in. And so we all kind of had that same feeling like, okay, we can't, stroll into church 5-10 minutes late and sit in the back. We've got to be there.
Dude, Jesus was so much more based and cool. Like, I'm sorry, knowing that he's the thief in the night that is carrying around the freaking torch. Yeah. And if you're not taking these covenants that I died for seriously, I'm going to burn your robes, man. Yeah. That is freaking my kind of Jesus. Not this like milquetoast teddy bear Jesus we got floating around in Minerva Tykart paintings. That's not a dig on Minerva Tykart, okay? But like, seriously, man, this is like, how is this not the beginning? How is this not like the first article in the Ensign this month? Instead of like, I don't know, 7 bears that look like Elijah, or like, I don't know what.
Well, and I think, do you want a Jesus who is powerful enough to save you from your sins? Or do you want a Jesus who just is nice to you?
Jeez, man. Okay. Wow. Is there more to this still? I'm exhausted.
You ready to be done?
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying, like, this is a lot, man. I can see why, like, when like Moses came down from the Temple Mount, they said like he'd aged. Yeah. Because you're just like, holy crap.
How, it actually says he was glowing. And that's one thing that they would, he had to wear a veil to protect the people down below from the glory he had gotten from being in the presence of God.
Wow.
And when they would actually anoint the bride and the groom during this process, and they would pour oil over their heads. And you see this turn up in Numbers 6, is it 6:25? It's the blessing for the Levitical priests. And it talks about, may the Lord make his face to shine upon thee. This isn't just a nice euphemism. This is when they were being ordained, they would pour olive oil over them and their face would shine from the olive oil, and it would point to the glory that the Lord has and the glory that our bridegroom has. And, wow. You think about, this was something I wanted to mention, was you think about the time and effort that a groom would go put into preparing a place for his wife to live. That's probably just not even scratching the surface of the preparations our bridegroom is making for us. Stuff we can't even comprehend.
Yeah.
Are we preparing ourselves to be there?
Yeah. Jeez, man, this is profound. Like, holy smoke. We are doing temple prep all wrong. Like, that's all I can say is they need to show this episode. Yeah, and just put it on repeat in the lobby. And wow. If people just knew this is what they were spiritually preparing for, it would just be so much more intense and awesome of an experience.
Yeah, because I think it does show the relationship that we can have with Jesus Christ. And sometimes, you hear people talk about, I have a relationship with Jesus, and it sounds like the teddy bear Jesus. Like when I'm sad, he comforts me, and all that's true. And all
he's a
that's good.
beloved babysitter from junior high that I remember that would listen to me about my first crush. And we had a really great talk about, the woes of X, Y, or Z video game, Wow.
But you think about, we say relationship. I think maybe we should look at it as relative to Christ. Where do we stand relative to Christ? Are we facing him and following him? Or are we distant? Because when that wedding party gets to that door and it's bolted shut, what does Jesus say? What does the bridegroom say to them?
Like not get thee hence, but basically like, I've never known you.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so in ancient times when they had these weddings, if somebody showed up late, knocks on the door and says, let me in, they'd say, you can't see through this big wooden bolted door. Okay. And it's dark, it's at night, so you don't know who's out there. And if you don't recognize somebody's voice, you're not going to let them in. And so when he says, I don't know you, or the JST, you don't know me, it's because I don't recognize your voice. I haven't heard from you. We're not on speaking terms.
Dude. Whoa. Wow. This is not, all right. So take us home?
So, yeah.
Are we...
So having this, I think so much of our covenants, of our temple ordinances, of our gospel understanding, it's there to prepare us to be this bride, to be at that wedding feast, which is very much symbolic of the millennium, to come to that door or to that veil or, wherever, to come stand face to face with him and to have him recognize us and to know that he paid that bride price for us.
So basically this episode is all about how the temple ordinances and basically our faith in general is one giant wedding feast that we're doing wrong and not getting right. And if we understood the symbology of the ancient bridegroom and wedding symbolism, like if we understood the symbolism of the ancient bridegroom ceremony, well, I don't even know what word I'm looking for here, but we just have a much more profound relationship with God and our own covenants.
Right. And you see that in the Bible. It begins with Genesis and the creation of a place for us to live. And then you see Adam, who's the bridegroom, having a rib taken from his side to create his bride. And you think of what Christ did on the cross. He received a wound in his side to pay for his bride, all of us.
Wow.
And then it ends in the book of Revelation with the great wedding feast. You go to Revelation 19 and it talks about the bridegroom is ready. Has the bride prepared herself? And yes, she is arrayed in white linen. She's ready to go. And now we're going to go into this wedding feast. So from beginning to end of the Bible, it's all about our covenant relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's enacted and formalized through temple ordinances.
Wow. Okay. Is there anything more? Are we done? Is this it? Or is there more?
I mean, there's so much more to it we could go into, but I think that's the gist.
Okay. So that's not the gist and all of the details. That's just the gist.
That's just the gist.
Wow. Okay. Well, so I don't know what to do. Like, I don't. Is there anything else big that we got to miss before we go here?
I think one thing is to remember, every Sunday when we walk into church and we sit down and take the sacrament and we listen to the words, and they're very familiar if you've been a member of the church for any amount of time. When it says you're willing to take his name upon you, what does that actually mean? It's a bride willing to take the name of her husband. You're willing to enter into this covenant relationship with him. And the token of that is that he paid the bride price of sacrificing himself, his body. And now you have the emblems of that to remind you that you're willing to take his name. You're not just a representative of him like we talk about. You are bound to him through an eternal covenant that binds you into the family of God. So
Dude, like Sunday church is so lame compared to the temple now that I like know all this stuff. If they would just teach this stuff at church on Sunday, we would all want to go to the temple like 30 times more often.
yeah, the temple is pretty amazing once you start to grasp what it's actually all about.
Dude, oh my gosh. Okay. All right. Any last words? Unfortunately, we got a hard out here.
Okay.
We got a jam.
Well,
but like,
yeah, I mean, I think that it's amazing to stop and think of what Jesus Christ actually did for us, the love he actually has for us, that self-sacrificial love in order to save us, the wayward covenant breaking type. And
speak for yourself. I was like an angel, dude. No, I'm just kidding.
sure you were, Cardin. Yeah, I mean, we've all fallen short of the glory of God. Yet there he is, our creator that created this incredible universe and is willing to take the stones for us, bind us to him, and bring us home.
Yeah, we are not Protestants light.
No.
We're not like a hipper, better version of that. Like,
and we're not
what
not
is-
Protestants plus.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what do you do if you don't have a temple in your religion? Like, does the parable of the 10 virgins just seem like a cute story?
I think that's how most of the parables are, that most of the parables point to the temple because the temple is where we enact and take upon ourselves that cosmic covenant of Christ's atonement. And most of the parables point to that. And if you don't have an understanding of the temple, you're not going to get it.
So it seems like the whole entire Bible this whole time has been pointing to temple worship and not towards just like really cute parables that make us be nicer to our brothers and sisters. And then, I don't know, the occasional immigrant, or like,
which is all
donate
good.
to the Salvation Army or like whatever.
But there is a deeper relationship available with the Savior, and there is more power available through those covenants than we ever imagined.
Okay. So I know, well, unfortunately we got a hard out here. We're gonna have to wrap it up, but I know my audience is gonna want to, they're gonna want to know so much more. And the rest of the stuff that's on that paper of yours that you've been flipping through here the whole time, I'm ready to steal it and just make a PDF of it and put it on Google Drive for them all to see. But how can people find you? How can people follow your stuff? You're writing a book now soon. Hit us.
Yeah, so I am in the middle of writing a book, which is what these notes are laying out for me. So, yeah, I don't know what to tell you because I'm a busy mom of 5 kids, so I don't have much of a social media presence.
Well, look, here's what we'll do. When your book does come out, we're going to be one of the first people to interview on this because we got to know more. If you liked what Andrea Woodmansee has to say, just please make sure you smash the like button on this video, that you subscribe, and also click the alert bell so that when we do more future content with her, you'll be first to find out. And as always, guys, this is amazing. For this and more, please check us out at wardradio.com. Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. We assume if you made it this far that you liked our content. So please make sure that you smash that like button and you share this video with your friends. Also, if you haven't subscribed yet to our channel, please make sure that you subscribe and you press the alert button so you receive alerts on every one of our daily uploads. Now, we want to make sure that we keep all of this content flowing for free to you, the viewer. And to do that, we need your help. If you're a person of means, please consider a direct contribution through Venmo or through Zelle. And the links to those platforms will be in the description as well. Also, if you want to help us out, please make sure you buy some of our merch. We got really cool hats, really cool t-shirts for both boy and girl viewers, all available on wardradio.com. And while you're there, you can sign up for our Ward Radio newsletter. You can receive all the really great Ward Radio news directly in your inbox simply by putting your email address in wardradio.com. And finally, if you guys want to help out purchasing some of the equipment in the studio, you can always check out our Amazon wish list that is also available in the description of this video. And either way, whether you're pressing this button here to make sure you're subscribed to our channel, or whether you're watching another video here just because you like our stuff, we look forward to seeing you guys in the next program.